Hello, everyone. Welcome to our woodland walk for September. And today we have the very wonderful guest, Dr. Anne Wagner, who is one of my favorite people from the psychedelic conference world and a good friend. And yeah, very inspiring colleague. Hello, Anne.
Hi, Roz. I'm so thrilled to get to talk to you. Yay.
Thank you. It's lovely to introduce you here to the ASA community and the wider community. Many of them will have heard of your work, and we have many of our members who are also in the States and in Canada and Australia. So, and I think many of them will have seen you in conferences as well. So, yeah. So I first met you at, I think it was Horizons, not Horizons, Psychedelic Science in
Yes,
California, Oakland.
that's right.
We
That's
were
right.
sharing a room together,
Sure.
and which was lots of fun. And so we got to know each other really well. And I also heard you speak, and your presentation was just incredibly impressive and amazing. And you were talking at the time about psychedelics paired with CBT, which I was really interested in because I had worked a bit with CBT in the UK National Health Service and had never really been a big fan of it. I think because I wasn't doing it properly. But when I heard you speak about pairing psychedelics with CBT, it was very impressive. But since then, you've done something really incredible, which I'm hoping we can focus on today because it's our gratitude month. So thinking of reaping the fruits of our labor. That we talk about the hazelnuts from the hazel tree, which is like the kind of the sweet nuts that come from all through the year, the tree kind of making those hazelnuts, and then we can store up that sustenance. And we talk of hazelnuts as like little moments of gratitude that we can store up in our kind of hazelnut boxes like squirrels so that we can kind of feast on them in the winter time. So thinking about this as a time of harvesting and thinking about your amazing clinic, Remedy, which you have set up and run, and it's really inspiring as a woman in this field running a successful psychedelic venture with strong ethical guidelines and real sense of care for the ecosystem you've created and warmth and compassion in your ways of working. So I'm imagining that there's probably a lot of kind of hazelnuts that you have to share around this process of coming to this point that you're at now. So that's enough from me. And tell us your story. Start wherever you'd like to begin. And yeah,
Oh,
welcome.
thank you, Roz. Yeah. Oh, I'm filled with such like warmth and gratitude to get to have this conversation. And even that concept of hazelnuts to me is really resonates. And my mind is going to all different places where I can gather some up to bring into this story. And um, you know what? Maybe I'll actually start back to that time when we met. And so that was in 2017, and um, I felt like a total newbie into this whole world of psychedelics and what that meant. And I had been working with my team, my little team, working on our little project in South Carolina for 2, 3 years at that point. And I, had been very focused on that. I loved our work. And so what we had been doing was combining CBT, but we were doing a couples therapy, a CBT couples therapy plus MDMA to see the impact of that on trauma. And it just completely captured my imagination and attention. And we literally were on an island, and I felt like I was on an island doing this work with my tiny little team of colleagues. And stepping out into psychedelic science in 2017 was my first time stepping out into a broader community. And it was such a joy to get to room and meet you, because I'm like, oh my goodness, here is a like-minded, like-hearted person who I can see how the impact of this work impacts all of us in a very similar way, and that we have these big ideas and these big dreams that are going to potentially translate into really wonderful things going forward. So that 2017, standing on that stage at Psychedelic Science, was my first time going like, oh my goodness, people are interested in this, people care about this. And I was so surprised and delighted that there were just such curious minds that were there. And I had just fascinating conversations at every break, every lunch, every dinner. And I left so full and so full of gratitude for that opportunity and that experience. And at that time, I did in the back of my head have this idea starting to percolate, which eventually became Remedy. And partly that idea was a response to wanting to continue to do this work and to continue to do it in a way that felt right and aligned for me. And I've always been this kind of bridge between worlds or experiences. I never felt 100% like part of the mainstream in any academic setting I was in or any placement setting, anything like that. And I found that I thought I was going to be a professor. Like I thought I was going to go into academia, and realized that like something doesn't feel quite right. And I know that I also want to be doing clinical work, and I really want to be doing psychedelic clinical work and psychedelic research. So when I stepped off the stage at Psychedelic Science, I already actually had another idea in mind for another study. And I was really lucky that at that meeting, I got a commitment of a donation to fund that, to seed that. So I knew that I had this philanthropic donation coming towards me, and that I was like, okay, I have to create a home to use it. I need to figure out how to do that. So I thought about this idea of like, what if we develop, or I develop a center, a place where we can innovate mental health, where we can support each other in our interesting and kind of different ideas, but that we can also be sustainable, and that we don't have to feel like we need to plug in 100% to any particular institution or particular way of thinking, that we have the latitude and the freedom and the flexibility to be ourselves and bring our whole selves to the work that we're doing. So I started to think about this idea of like, how can I create essentially like an independent research hub to do that, and a place where we can do clinical work. And so I went through some different ideas, and I had really wanted to move from this nonprofit model that to me felt important, and especially to not be extractive around healthcare, around psychedelics, around traditional wisdom. Like that felt very important to me. So what I landed on in terms of developing this model for Remedy, it's really an ecosystem of several organizations. So there's Remedy, which is a clinic. And so it is your full service psychotherapy clinic, where we provide mental health care. We see a range of different presentations, and the community that we draw in are ones who feel comfortable in a space that maybe doesn't feel as traditional. And so we have a real focus on 2S LGBTQ communities, on artist communities, on different groups who we feel really akin to and love supporting, and we feel part of too. So that was a real focus. And then I was like, okay, how does this work with the research? So the other part of the ecosystem is Remedy Institute, which is a charity, which means we went through all the hoops, jumped through all those hoops to register as a Canadian charity. So therefore we can accept donations and offer charitable receipts. And we're, regulated by all of the charitable law. And the way it functions is that all of the profit from the clinic is donated to the charity, which keeps it sustainable, which keeps it ticking along on a day-to-day basis. And then when we do a large project like our clinical trials, we receive philanthropic donations to run those, and we're able to do that through the charity. So that means our work in the clinic helps support the work in the charity, and then the work in the charity is actually what we do in the clinic in terms of being able to provide services and of what we're testing. And then we also offer bursaries, meaning we offer no-cost services through the charity and people can either take them to Remedy or elsewhere. And that's my dream of being able to not have to have people use mental health care as a commodity, and instead be able to access it when they need it, and in the very like tailored and specific ways that they need. So this ecosystem has existed now for 6 years. We've kind of made it past toddlerhood. We are, we're in elementary school, and that to me is amazing. And one of the things I'm most grateful for within it is the community that we've created and our providers that are here. And I had this idea, and I was like, I don't know if anyone else is gonna want to join this. And our team has 20 plus therapists now, and our research team is over a dozen people, all working really hard to on these ideas and caring. And that to me is exciting. And also, I've always had it as this vision of this field of wildflowers, where we all get to coexist and grow, and we're not kind of uniform in the way that we do things, but that we are a supportive ecosystem to each other, and that everyone has a chance to flourish. And that's what it feels like now when I get to see things bustling here, or people coming into the space, and getting to know that that's taking root and is feeling sustainable.
Oh, wow. So beautiful. And so just imagining what it must feel like for the people that come there, knowing that at the very heart of this place, there is this not just kind of emphasis on providing care for people that need it, but the innovation that's there as well. It's really kind of cutting edge. You're offering people some really cutting edge new ways of working. So it's a lovely balance of that, like nurturing and accessibility, offering things like the bursary idea is so lovely, but then also this idea of, yeah, you're also getting something really kind of, yeah. So tell us about the different services that people can, and also about the clinical trials.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, in terms of different services, we offer a therapy through a whole different range of therapeutic modalities too, which I think is really important and encouraged, that we have our clinicians bring their best skills, and that can range from CBTs to IFS to psychodynamic approaches, lots of emotion-focused therapy, and people work with individuals and couples and different relationship constellations. So we have that, and we have assessment as well. And we run groups. We have an integration group that runs here. We have one of our team members ran a climate anxiety group. So just being able to experiment and try different things and see what the community is interested in and wants to take part in. And we also, the beautiful thing is our space here is designed to be able to host different types of events too. So we have external people who come in once every 2 months or so and run holotropic breath work out of the space. And that just feels like a really important connection to the work that we're doing. And especially for us, those of us who are doing any psychedelic work, feeling like we have an opportunity to connect with non-ordinary states on a regular basis as well. So that's one thing that's beautiful here in Canada, is we do have an opportunity to do some legal psychedelic work through what's called the Special Access Program in Canada. So we do case-by-case applications kind of as we have capacity amongst the team for folks with PTSD or depression who've tried really everything that's available at the moment. And Health Canada is pretty strict around that, but I understand the function of that mechanism. It's really meant to be a experimental treatment when nothing else has worked. But we've been able to be successful with some of those applications, and therefore get to do psychedelic work in practice. And that's just a dream. So we do that. And then we also are running our clinical trials. And so the clinical trials are extensions of that original study that I talked about in Oakland. One of them, which we've just finished, is a pilot study combining a type of individual treatment for PTSD called cognitive processing therapy plus MDMA. And then we're in the midst of starting to screen for our large couples study. So that one has been many years in the works, and we're finally at the point where, you know, people are welcome to start coming into the study, which is exciting and feels like we've made it past the first hurdle of demonstrating we can do this in this context in remedy. And now we get to do the second time, which feels like, okay, we've gone through the first learning hurdles, and now we can execute the second one.
And this is where one member of the couple has PTSD, is that right? And the other member of the couple is there to support, and they both have MDMA therapy together and go through a process of bonding. And yeah, could you tell us a little bit about how that, I mean, it's such a lovely concept. Tell us a little bit about what you find in this work.
Yeah, I love the couples work. I think that to me is my favorite. I am so relationally oriented and just wanting to support connection and support the power of relationships to be able to support us through really difficult experiences. And the premise of this treatment is that both people are equal participants through the whole thing. It's not that the person who has PTSD is, you know, the patient and that the partner is assisting them. Instead, it really welcomes the knowing that the partner is also having their own experience, and it's often extremely difficult to be in that position. So they both are participant through the whole thing, and the focus is understanding how PTSD has really impacted the relationship and impacted their lives. So we do lots of things to both, you know, tackle the PTSD, but also to bolster the relationship and help it feel nourishing and good and supportive. So we do that. And the thing I'm really excited about this next study is it's a comparison, but a different type of comparison than most psychedelic studies. So we're not using a placebo. Instead, because I'm really a psychotherapy trialist, not a drug researcher, the idea is we're comparing the couples therapy on its own to the couples therapy plus MDMA. So it's like, what does it add, or what can it help amplify or support? And then the group who doesn't get the MDMA initially, once they finish the treatment, they can then cross over and get to MDMA sessions so that they have that opportunity. And so I'm really hoping that some of those folks in that condition won't have PTSD at the end because we think the treatment's going to work. And then they're going to get 2 MDMA sessions with couples therapy, just couples therapy. So that to me is so exciting to get to explore that, do that. You know, that will be the first legal test experiment to just couples therapy with MDMA, which we know is, you know, so widely worked with, generally speaking, but to be able to do that in a trial feels very cool.
Wow. And how will you measure the outcomes of this trial?
Yeah. So for the actual PTSD part, we look at a measure of a self-report measure of PTSD symptoms and an independent rater assessment of it. But then we also are looking at a whole range of other outcomes, including, for big one for me is relationship satisfaction, of how are you feeling in your relationship? How are your social connections more generally? All in the whole wide array of things that can change, like post-traumatic growth. How do your self-compassion, your sense of feeling like you have some flexibility in your mind, like all these different pieces that sometimes we lose when we're too focused on just saying, do you have PTSD anymore?
Yes. And if anyone is watching this or listening to this and is who might be eligible to apply, they might know people, is it open to how do people get in touch if they're interested in taking part?
Yeah. So I think the biggest thing is folks do need to live in the Toronto area. So I'm in Toronto, Canada. So people need to live in what we call the Greater Toronto area. That's the main thing. And then beyond that, it needs to be one person has PTSD and then another person does not. And so it's interesting is, like, I say couples, but it actually doesn't need to be a romantic couple. It can be any two close people who are in relationship and impacted together. So it could be a parent-child, it could be, or both need to be adults, or it could be, siblings, close friends, really kind of a broad idea of a couple in relationship. So those are the main things that we'd be looking at.
Oh, well, I can't wait to see you at a conference soon presenting your findings. Although I suppose you're going to be doing this for a while now, aren't you? This is probably going to be a conference a few years down the line where we're going to hear about this. But I have no doubt that it's going to be so helpful for everyone taking part, and wonderful for you and your colleagues to be observing that. I've got a couple more questions for you, Anne. I would really love to hear from you as you think about this path from all these years since that conference, and now you're sitting there in your clinic having established this really quite amazing ecosystem with this amazing sustainability built in within it, and this all these ways of keeping it really robust and dynamic and fair. There's a real sense of kind of fairness and balance in the way you've set this up. When you reflect on your journey, what have been the things that have been the most joyful for you, and also what have been the things that have been the most difficult for you?
Oh yeah, well, I think interesting. I'm going to start with the difficult and then move into the joy, because that feels like the right direction. So I think one of the difficult things has been in times that feel darker, just continuing on, because there's not a lot of other examples of this. So there's not a lot of templates to draw from. And so it's trying to keep imagining what it can be, even when you don't have an example to map onto. I think that's one. I think the other thing is we've experienced such a wild ride in the psychedelic world in the past, since that 2017 conference, right? Oh my goodness. It's been, yeah, it's been a lot. I don't even know how to describe it, but I
Yeah.
was so angry for a while at the feeling of commodification that was happening, and the idea that we could cookie cutter practice, that there could be chains of clinics. Like I think one of the big things that really impacted me was, I think early on, like having conversations with folks who wanted to invest, or folks who wanted to franchise or to buy us, or these different things. And at first I was just curious. Like I walk into most things with curiosity, being like, oh, what's this conversation going to be? And it was so difficult to just not internalize, or not get too upset around this idea of being like, well, I was really criticized for not kind of having vision about growth for Remedy. And I remember thinking, like, that seems ridiculous to me. Like it just does not fit. And clearly people don't understand the model of what we're doing. The whole point is creating these ecosystems that continue, sustain, and we don't need to have 1,000 of them. We just need to have one, or someone can replicate it and they can have another, and then that feels good. Um and I remember getting an email from someone who I thought was going to be a philanthropic donor, and the email not only didn't follow through with that, but then basically said, come back to me when you have something interesting to talk about, aka investment. And I was just like, oh, and criticizing, saying like that we're going to miss opportunity, we're going to not be well positioned in the market. And I was like, I don't care. Like and that idea of being like, and here we are, we exist and are doing this work, and it's 6 years later. Most of these other ventures don't exist anymore, or are very different in what they offer. And so that was a lot of difficulty and a lot of darkness, and now feels like a lot of light and joy, because it's like, okay, we're just doing our thing, and we are doing it at the pace that feels right for us. We're growing at the pace that feels right for us, that we can sustain, and we're able to hone our offerings and what we are learning and growing into as psychedelic therapists in a way that feels really right for us. So yeah, I think that the darkness turned into the light, which, as it always does, having to go through it. And yeah, and I think the joy for me is also just seeing people start to come into their own, and knowing that this is a real possibility to build their lives and careers around this type of work. Yeah.
Yeah, a really robust example of when it takes roots, takes
Mm-hmm.
roots and thrives. And actually, yeah, thinking that when you were talking, you've really done it in line with what we talk about as the nature codes, which is like the rhythms and patterns of nature. So the rhythm being slow and cyclical. So like bursts of activity, and then taking some time to reflect and say, hey, what's working, what's not working? Like I know you've had to do like a million audits. So
Yeah.
lots of time when you've had to be like reflecting, looking, seeing, learning, growing, learning, like this organic cyclical process. And so those are the rhythms of nature, but the patterns of nature is interconnected and in balance. And your ecosystem, where you've created this thing where they've got all the different people in place and all the different systems that speak to each other, and the balance of it, it sounds like it's really, I mean, you are obviously like you're the director, I guess. Is that your title? You're like the director.
Yeah.
But then I imagine from knowing you that you hold your leadership in a very kind of democratic and yeah, a way that I can imagine that your colleagues feel that you're part of the system rather than kind of sitting on top of it kind of thing.
That's very much my hope. And, I've done some investigation into different models of structure and whatnot, and really keep leaning towards models that feel more of a flatter hierarchy. And that to me is so much more appealing than being the person in charge. And particularly too, given sometimes visibility of the work lands more on one person than on the team, and trying to encourage the fact that, like, this is not my lab, this is an organization and a community, and trying to really foster that, encourage that.
Mm. Well, it's very inspiring. And I think for many people listening as well, I remember that time when we were all like, we want to open a psychedelic clinic. It was like psychedelic clinic was the thing that everybody wanted to do. And
Yeah.
yeah, there were some really big ones, and there were some really big ones that didn't last. So really important for us all to really heed what you're saying about, you don't need a million. You don't need to like take, keeping, what's that saying about your eyes being bigger than your belly, like keeping that in check and just having one that works really well, and then growing organically and slowly, rather than that feeling of like, I mean, when you say about that interview, the email saying, let me know when you have something interesting, I was just thinking that just like says everything. Like that just says so much about our culture and capitalism, what is interesting and what's not interesting. And
Yeah.
the fact that Remedy is thriving, even as so many others have not,
Mhm.
says it gives me so much hope that actually what is interesting in our culture is changing. And
Mhm.
actually now what people want is something that has all the heart rather than the dollar signs.
Yeah.
And yeah, and you're doing
Well,
that.
that is my hope and my dream for that. And I think too, for us in particular, or for me in this approach too, it's like psychedelic work is one part of the puzzle. And I think that's also why we're sustainable, is that we do general psychotherapy as well. And knowing that, like, if we're going to do work with psychedelics, it's a piece of that puzzle. It's a part of someone's journey, as opposed to being, this is what we do. And other models might think of that differently, but I know in my conceptualization of how I work, that fits for me, and seems to be working for us.
Yes, keeping the grounding as well, not getting too like elevated with the intoxicating world of psychedelics and what they offer.
That's right.
Oh, Anne, well, we hope we'll have you back again soon.
Oh,
And
please. Yeah, of
thank you for your time.
course. What a joy. Really glad to
Oh,
be here.
we'll see you very soon, and good luck with when does the trial begin now? Like, when do you start? Yeah, when
Yeah,
do you?
we're open for recruitment right now. So yeah,
So it's going to be a very busy winter for you.
it is. Yeah,
After
but
many,
a welcome one.
yeah, after many, many other busy winters. That was my fight. Like, I wanted to say as well, thinking about the nature codes and about these cycles of like light and dark and like go, go, go and rest and hibernation. Can you imagine a time on the cards where you can have some rest time? Is there some Anne relaxation time coming anytime soon?
There is, I think, yes, I know. It's great. I took some knowing that there would be a big push now. And it does feel in line with the nature codes. It's like we had been planting, everything was growing, and now it's like, okay, it's time to go and like harvest it all. And to me, the actual running of the trial and being in it feels like, okay, that'll be the piece that we can move through, as opposed to all these pieces of getting everything in place and ready. And so I think, once the team is in motion and we run a few of the cases through, that'll be time for me to have a little nap and a little break.
Well, you're one of the only people I know where running a clinical trial will be seen as a rest compared to the rest of your work. I love it. Well, we need people like you to bring these things forward. So thank you, and lots of love.
To you.
Thank
Thank
you,
you.
Anne. Thank you.